In the previous lectures, we showed how we can define the thickness and how we can define the bend radius. The next parameter that we're going to show is bend allowance. So if we go here to the sheet metal feature, edit feature, here we have a bend radius, thickness, and here we have bend allowance. So what is bend allowance? Bend allowance represents the stretch of the sheet in the bend regions. Bend allowance, in other words, tells us how big will be our part when all bends will be unfolded. So it allows us to accurately calculate the size of the flattened part. And here we have few options how we can calculate the bend allowance. We have a K-factor, bend table, bend allowance, bend deduction, bend calculation. We're going to explain those later. Now let's go here on this picture. Let's explain here more in detail what is bend allowance. So here we have our sheet, as you can see. If we bend our sheet, then here we have this form, this one here. So here we have the leg length 1, and here we have the leg length 2. This one here is inside bend radius, this one here. So this is the bend radius that we can define. And this radius between inner edge and outer edge is bend allowance. So this is the arc length. It now depends where this radius is. For example, it can be here on the inner edge, and it can be here on the outer edge, or it can be anywhere between those two edges. So depends where this arc is, you will have different bend allowance. So now if we flatten our part, here we have L1, L2, and here we have bend allowance. So for example, if we select the bend allowance, the arc length of the inner radius, we will get different result if we select the outer radius. The total flat length will be different. Let's go to the SolidWorks. So here we have a difference method how we can calculate that bend allowance, how we can calculate that arc length. Here we have K-factor, bend table, bend allowance, bend deduction, bend calculation. So here we have a different options. So depends how we measure, depends on the option, we can get different values. And different industries use different methods. So when you change the method, the length of the part in the flattened state will be different. So the first option that we're going to show here is K-factor, this one here. And down here, we can define the value of the K-factor. So what is the K-factor? K-factor is a ratio that represents the location of the neutral sheet with respect to the thickness of the sheet metal. So the K-factor is an imaginary line where no stretching or compression occurs. So let's go here to our picture again. So if we bend this part, this one here, on the inner edge we have compression, this one with the red. On the outer edge, here we have stretching, the green one. And now here, between the compression and stretching, where we don't have compression or stretching, we have neutral axis. So now, if this neutral axis is on this edge, inner edge, then we have K-factor 0. If we have neutral axis right on the outer edge, then we have K-factor 1. If we have our neutral axis between inner and outer edge right in the middle, then we have K-factor 0.5. And now depends on the value of the K-factor, we will get different total length of the flat sheet part. So let's show this. So here we have K-factor by default 0.5. Now let's click OK. Now let's try to flatten this part, this sheet. Let's go here, let's go to flatten. Now let's measure the total length. Let's go to evaluate, measure. Let's get closer. Let's select this edge. So here we have 1601.58. Let's close this. Now let's go to the sheet metal, edit feature. Let's go with K-factor 1, like this. Now the neutral axis is on the outer edge. And now we should have bigger length. So let's go here to the measure. Let's select this edge here. So now here we have 1603, and before we had 1601. And now you can see how the total length of the flat part is changing based on the value of the K-factor. Because the bend allowance is changing depends on the K-factor. If we select here the inner edge 0 or 0.5 or 1 as a K-factor, we will get different bend allowance, and we will get a different, as you can see here, total length of our flat sheet. Now let's go to the SolidWorks. Let's go to the sheet metal, edit feature. So the K-factor is only one option. The next option that here we have is bend table. Bend table option is used for selecting bend table, which is a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet for defining the bend allowance of the sheet metal. So the bend table contains calculated bend allowance or bend deduction values corresponding to the thickness, bend angle, and bend radius values. So you can select here any bend table, and then you can calculate the bend allowance by using the machine book, depends on the thickness, bend angle, and the bend radius. So here you can find those bend tables. So we have to go to the same place where we shown our gauge tables. So let's go to our disk. Let's go here to Program Data. Let's go SolidWorks Corporation, SolidWorks Language, English, and here we have sheet metal bend tables. For example, we can select your metric base bend table. And here you can see, here we have the thickness, here we have the angle and the radius. And now for this thickness and the angle and the radius, you have to calculate the bend allowance. And then if you go to SolidWorks, you select this table, then you will have here bend allowance that you have in the table. So this is also the option that you can use for calculating the bend allowance. The next option here is bend allowance. So you can put here any value for a bend allowance. And then based on that value, you will have a different length over a flat sheet part. The next option is bend deduction. Bend deduction measures the outside size of the part and remove values from there. We won't use bend deduction, so we won't get into detail. And the last option that we have here is bend calculation. You can also select here a table, as you can see. So on selecting the bend calculation option, the bend allowance, bend deduction, or K-factor value gets important from the selected tables. So the most important thing is that you know what is bend allowance. So again, bend allowance here is the arc length. And this arc length can vary from the inner edge to the outer edge. And depends where it is, we can get a different total flat length of our part. And here we have different methods how we can calculate the bend allowance. Bend table, K-factor, bend allowance, bend deduction, bend calculation. In this course, we're going to use K-factor and we're going to leave it here 0.5. And that means that our neutral axis will be right in the middle between the inner edge and the outer edge, like this. And this will be our bend allowance. So for now, we have covered the bend radius, the thickness, bend allowance. And in the next lecture, we're going to cover auto relief.